So welcome back to the Privacy Impact Shop, where I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Shaab al-Baghdadi. How you doing, sir? You well?
I'm good. Been busy. I understand you've had a birthday, haven't you?
Not yet. Well, I will have done by the time this has gone out, actually.
Yeah.
It's tomorrow. But by the time this goes out next week, it would have been and gone. So.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, yeah. So when it comes out, will you look older than you do now?
Probably.
Yeah,
most probably.
That's the ability of like, what we can do. We can manipulate images.
Another week older, but not wiser. Never wiser.
No, not if you have a good party. You won't be.
What have you been up to?
Well, quite a bit really. So there's I've just spent some time doing education, which we'll talk about. So I've got some new certifications coming along. That's going to be probably the next 12 months, bedding myself in that.
Well done.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've been busy.
Yes. And there's a lot coming out as well around what's happening sort of from a European perspective. So it might be worth just touching on that very quickly, because there are a couple of interesting fines that came out. Apple got fined 500 million.
Okay.
And Meta 200 million euros from the European Data Protection Board on the basis of breaches around the Digital Marketing Act. Now, I'm not going to go into the sort of ins and outs of those fines, but what was interesting about those is that they start to show that there is a bit of tension between competition law and data protection law.
Yes.
And what we're seeing, obviously, with sort of, geopolitical, economic, PCs moving globally, I think we're going to see much more of that as things move on. So sort of looking at that, thinking how that's going to affect clients, how that's going to affect advice, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's the plates are moving.
Do you think it seems to be quite a similar story, doesn't it? Big tech firms, huge fines, usually hundreds of millions. Is it really having an impact, do you feel?
So I don't think fines in and of themselves necessarily have a huge impact, but they do kind of set the sense of direction of where things are going. So, 500 million to someone like Apple, or 200 million to, Meta. Is it going to upset them too much? Possibly not, but it probably means that it's more along the lines of they might have to change their model. So this is their model around, data collected for various users being combined. Do they have the lawful grounds for that? And that whole piece around sort of pay for advertising as well, or going advertising field, that's slightly different. So those are the situations there. And as well, Apple was, the fact that you were sort of steered into the Apple store to buy products and goods. So I think in and of themselves are fine. It's not a big impact, but
It's a good night out for them.
It's probably it's probably their company do. What we normally spend,
No.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I think, as always, there's a million and one things that we could sit down and talk about.
100%.
Shoot the breeze with. But I think for today, we kind of landed on, let's talk about data protection officers, the role of a DPO, training, that kind of space within data protection officers, and whether, I guess the current climate, the advance of technology is really changing that. I do wonder whether the regulation is starting to be a bit out of date. I'll gladly get your opinion on that in context of data protection officers and the and the legal role of those. You recently put a blog out. Let's talk a little bit about that and the purpose behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I was reflecting on sort of my experiences, and because obviously I've acted as a DPO, I've trained DPOs, I've supported DPOs, so I've done all of those kind of roles, all various guises of it. And I was sort of reflecting on, when it goes well, it's a really great role to be in. But when there's misalignment between the organisation and the data protection officer, it can be quite a awful place to be.
Yeah, and to your point, you've seen it from, well, not even just both sides of the fence, on the fence, left side of the fence, right side,
knocking the fence over, painting the fence,
being the fence. But you know, where you've been one, you have trained many hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, probably getting that.
You've been, or you are, you know, a virtual or external data protection officer. So, and you've worked with many, you know, in different disguises, I suppose. So, you know, that does give you and put you in quite a, I guess, a relatively unique position.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the DPO role and the interesting part is that, you know, you have to be independent, you know, understanding what the role actually is, you know, advising, maintaining compliance or advising on the compliance position for the organisation. Why is it critical? I think it's critical because more and more organisations need to actually be able to demonstrate their compliance position around this.
Yeah.
And I think that comes on to your other point about, which you mentioned about evolving technologies. So evolving technologies are changing the face of regulations as well. So I mentioned, you know, the Digital Marketing Act. We also have the EU AI Act, AI EU Act.
Yeah.
Now, I think the thing about that is, you know, there are 4 categories of risk in that AI Act: prohibited, high risk, medium risk, and sort of low risk. And only probably, you know, this is a very sort of broad statement, but who's going to be in the high risk category? It's probably around about 10% of companies in terms of, because it's not based on the technology, it's based on the use.
Yes.
Now, we're seeing globally, the US, we're seeing Europe trying to move to a more deregulated position around this. The EU is kind of, I wouldn't say watering down, but they're thinking about their competitive position as well.
Yeah.
But recent comments coming out of Europe is, look, even though only 10% or so might be high risk, GDPR applies to any position, whether they're low risk or high risk, if it's personal data. So it begs the question, does GDPR become more relevant now?
Yeah, okay.
Because it seems it's like everyone, I think, was sort of focused on the new regulations, which is natural. But if the new regulations are kind of going, you know, we're not sure what they're going to look like, how, you know, not diligently, but, you know, how sort of how they're going to be enforced, how they're going to be interpreted, that sort of thing, then it means, but they're still saying, well, GDPR is still definitely, if it's personal data, then it's like, well, is this more relevant now?
Yeah.
We know it. We've lived with it for a while. We kind of understand it. The difficulty, how it's going to apply around AI.
Yeah. And interesting to that is anyone in a position of, and it's not just data protection officers, but anyone, and you could argue this should be everyone within an organisation, but anyone that's, I guess, let's say directly responsible for data protection within any organisation.
Yeah.
How do you manage that responsibility if you don't understand AI, if you don't understand the technology? Where do you start with that? Because I imagine there's lots of people out there that are sitting there thinking, hold on a minute, I need to really sharpen up on this, and my understanding around the technology itself is quite limited. Yet perhaps the business is now coming to me, or I need to proactively go into the business and start engaging with anyone that's kind of talking about or implementing AI. And we're seeing it within our customer
100%.
base quite broadly, aren't we? There's,
Absolutely.
AI working groups and governance structures being set up left, right, and centre, and admittedly, a lot of those are in their infancy. But just as quick as AI has kind of, in the last sort of 2 or 3 years really ramped up, I suspect these working groups will adopt just as quickly.
Definitely, because I think what's happened is, back to your question about understanding this, the skill set for data protection officers, you've got to understand it from a technical position. You've got to have some experience. You've got to have credibility within the role. All of those are attributes of being able to be a good data protection officer. But it's been very focused.
Yeah.
Or it can be very focused around the legislation, i.e. GDPR, and the daily task and how you operationalise that role and advising. So you've had to understand things like risk, harms, application of the articles, etc., relevant articles. But that's expanding now.
Yeah.
So DPOs, because as you rightly say, there are now working groups around AI, looking at automation, new technologies, use of personal data, supply chain efficiencies. The list goes on.
Yep.
It poses the question: is the DPO, first of all, for their main role, adequately qualified with the skill sets? But secondly, what's that journey look like for the new world they're being pulled into?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. You're going to have to learn a few more languages to remain relevant in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Could be, fairly daunting or perhaps exciting place for many DPOs out there, right now. I think someone said to me recently, you should be as excited as you are scared with AI coming down the tracks.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to be talking a lot more about AI with other guests and, as this season goes on. But I also feel that just, before you even start looking at the technologies that are affecting this, it is a whole new world around the importance of data governance.
Absolutely.
Which is the sort of leapfrog, the stepping stone to anything an organisation wants to do. And if I go back a few years, I know you probably think, how could you, Shaab? You look so young. But if I go back a few years, you sort of go, well, we were talking about data-centric decisions, data being the new gold. So that's not a new kind of,
concept.
Conversation. Yeah. But it's sort of, it kind of not fell off a cliff, but it sort of died away a little bit. But if I just look on, the sort of careers market, people with data governance, qualifications, skill sets, etc., very high demand.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know, the sort of provenance of your data, you kind of, in a bit of a sticky wicket straight away.
What's your view? Do you think there's a shortage, sort of in general, more broadly, in the privacy industry or the privacy space?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's not me just saying it because it's the world I live in.
Yeah.
You can look at reports and of suitable qualified data protection officers. There's probably a shortage. This is going back a couple of years now. 65,000.
Yeah.
Regulators need to employ these individuals, and that's a challenge. So they're trying to recruit people all the time. They can't get them, and they can't retain them.
Yeah.
Because, you go into the private sector, you earn a lot more money. It's as simple as that.
Well, that's always been the case, hasn't it?
100%.
And we've seen a lot of that, especially with, the big blue chip and corporates. They're, they pay the wages, don't they? So
yeah.
They pay the big salaries.
Yeah, so, we've got the big salaries, and you tend, it's just a factor of life. You get the right talent.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not all down to money. I mean, it's for me, but you know, it's you know, there are other factors to it. Of course, there are, but generally speaking, if you've you know, got experience, you've got qualifications, and this is interesting about the difference in approaches. So if you look, you know, if I'm looking at, say, the UK and somebody saying, you know, the questions are, what do you do? What have you done? What have you delivered before in this role? If I compare that to, say, and this is a big generalisation, I know, but if you compare that to, say, the German market, before they even it's what are your certifications?
Yeah.
You know, what have you got? What have you got to demonstrate your competence? Similar as well in France. In fact, in France, they have their own certified data protection officer. In Poland, it's very much, you know, you can't. It's not like here where anyone who came last for a meeting can be called a DPO. Although that is changing. But in Poland, you know, you can't be a DPO until you've got at least, I think it's 2 or 3 years experience.
Yeah, look, you know, we both employ people and we're hiring managers, and I think my personal view, and I'm sure you'll agree, experience comes way above any of that for me. But I think it depends on the role in a lot of cases. So
it does, and it's, you know, it's what, I mean, we're kind of, so what, I guess that opens up a question, what is the point of certification? So certification can be there to, well, first of all, demonstrate that you have, you know, a level of competence, skill and ability, whether that, you know, and that could well be technical.
Yep.
So why do you want to do that? Well, I think, first of all, it's understanding what your stakeholders want to see. So your stakeholders can be, you know, shareholders, board members, data subjects, regulators, financiers, and, you know, you can't necessarily send all of those different stakeholders a CV and go, look how, you know, when I was at school, I used to do the egg and spoon, and then I started to get into data protection. Like, not interested in that. What we want to know is the person that's there to regulate the lawful use of data, are they competent? And the quickest and easiest way to do that is to say they're certified.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are really the drivers for certification. It's not, you know...
But I think, you know, if you've got experience, you can go and get the badges.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people come through, you know, on the courses that we sell and you deliver, whereby those individuals have been within the industry, whether indirectly or directly, for some time. They have a level of experience. It's not, you know, day one, I woke up this morning, got out of bed and decided, I'm going to do, you know, a certified privacy training course. So it's about, you know, I think gaining some experience and then obtaining those certifications is probably the most common path that we see, rather than the other way around. And then it comes into, well, where does this sit in terms of things like university courses versus globally recognized certifications and accreditations? Do they complement each other? Is it one or the other? You know, for people that want to start to get into privacy, and it is an exciting time. We seem to sort of go through waves, don't we?
Yeah.
Where many years, 6, 7, 8 years ago, GDPR was kind of really, you know, front and center. And as we've already discussed, you know, it feels like it's, you know, more relevant than ever. Based on the based on what's happening around technology and AI. So again, it feels like a really good opportunity and a really good, exciting time for people to kind of come into the industry. And whether they're coming in from, you know, straight out of education, or perhaps they're coming in from other roles, maybe, albeit they, you know, could be legal, IT, security. You know, we see lots of people coming in from lots of different paths.
100%.
And we should encourage that, and absolutely, drive and help people find their paths through their privacy careers.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't just sort of say, oh, I'm in data protection or I'm in privacy and that's it. Even within that, there are so many specialist areas you can go into.
Yeah.
For example, you could become, a privacy technologist where you are looking at, being there to put in place controls, embedding data protection requirements into technology. So things like differential privacy engineering and things like that.
Yep.
Or, and you mentioned about universities and those roles. Well, again, I would say they are more specialist areas. So we see that whole round of privacy engineering.
Yeah.
And to be honest, NIST are probably the big players in that. But, when we look at software development, whether you're doing, things like Scrum or Waterfall or whatever it may be, this whole area of engineering, embedding privacy controls and architecture into the software development. So that's a very different discipline to being a DPO, for example, or being a program manager. And you experience absolutely is a factor in that, as it is in any role. But to be involved in privacy engineering, for example, it is much more important to have the technical knowledge.
Yeah.
So if you were, for example, wanting to be a data scientist, okay, experience helps, but unless you need
an understanding.
Yeah, regression in statistics and, that sort of thing. Doesn't matter how much experience you've got, you need the knowledge. You need someone to impart that knowledge to you in a formal, structured way.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
So again, in privacy, you've got, I don't want to be sort of say you're generalist. That's not fair. But, you've got this umbrella.
Yeah.
And then, which path you want to go down to. And there are more and more opportunities. And that's where I think university and technical training colleges have their role and their part to play. Absolutely fantastic sort of sector or industry to be in at the moment. It is, I'm quite sort of passionate about it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only see that broadening out even further in terms of, you go back many years, and I think a lot of people would view privacy as, privacy's privacy, and now we're starting to get layers and layers of more specialist areas and domains.
Absolutely.
And I personally just see that going, that's only going one way. So
yeah,
completely agree. Exciting times ahead. Well, look, I think we've run out of time. So as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Shaab.
Yes, I look forward to seeing you much older.
Yeah, on the next one.
Yeah.
So look, thank you very much. This has been the Privacy Impact Shop with myself, Ben Stevens, and my good friend and colleague, Shaab al-Baghdadi.
Hi.
Please subscribe, like, comment, give us some love, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you very much. Take care, and God bless.
Take care. Bye now.